A whisper begins in darkness. There are words that should not be spoken. There are symbols that should not be carved. There are names that should not be written. In the deep hours of night, when the torches burn low and the Nile holds its breath, we remember the scribes who went too far. We remember the curses that lived. We remember the madness written into stone. The temple is quiet now. The air is cool. The columns rise into shadow. Somewhere, incense drifts, faint, sacred, old. Tonight, we speak of the curse written to drive men mad, not whispered, not chanted, written, carved into eternity. Come closer. Sit here beside the carved wall. Feel the stone, cool beneath your hand. The night is long. The story is older. In the time of the Old Kingdom, when the pyramids still gleamed white under the sun, there lived a high priest named Khentiamentiu. His name meant foremost of the Westerners. He served in the temple of Anubis, the jackal-headed god, the guardian of tombs, the weigher of hearts. Khentiamentiu was not like other priests. He did not merely read the sacred texts. He rewrote them. He did not merely copy spells. He invented new ones. He believed that words themselves, properly arranged, properly carved, could reshape reality, could bind the gods, could command death itself. The other priests watched him. They whispered among themselves. They saw him working late into the night, alone in the inner chambers, by the light of a single lamp. His fingers traced hieroglyphs that no one had taught him. His lips moved, forming sounds that predated language. The high priest of the temple, an old man named Amenemhet, finally confronted him. "What are you writing, Khentiamentiu?" The younger priest looked up. His eyes were tired. His hands were stained with ink. "I am writing what must be written," he said. "For whom?" "For those who would dare to disturb the dead." Amenemhet felt cold, even in the warm night air of Thebes, even surrounded by torchlight. He felt cold. "The spells of protection already exist," he said carefully. "They have existed for generations. They are sufficient." Khentiamentiu smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Sufficient to warn," he said, "not sufficient to punish." And he returned to his work, his reed pen scratching against papyrus, his breath slow and even, his concentration absolute. Let us pause here. Let us breathe with the night. The Nile flows outside these walls, steady, eternal, unconcerned with human ambition. The stars turn overhead. The desert holds its ancient silence. Inside the temple, shadows gather in the corners. Incense smoke rises, curling, dispersing into darkness. We do not rush these tales. They unfold in their own time, like lotus flowers opening at dawn, like the sun moving across painted ceilings, like memory itself. Khentiamentiu worked for 7 months, through the season of Akhet, when the Nile flooded the fields, through Pere, when the waters receded and the planting began, into Shemu, the time of harvest and heat. He wrote on papyrus first, testing phrases, combining divine names in ways that had never been combined, invoking powers that slept beneath the earth. He studied the old curses, the warnings carved at tomb entrances. Those who enter this tomb with impure hearts will be seized by the neck like a bird. The crocodile will be against them in the water, the snake against them on land. They will be judged by the gods and found wanting. These were strong words, but Khentiamentiu believed they were not strong enough. Thieves still entered the tombs. Robbers still violated the sacred spaces. The dead still cried out from their disturbed rest. So he crafted something new, something that would not merely threaten, but act, something that would enter the mind of the transgressor, plant itself there, grow, consume. He called it the curse of unending thought. Listen carefully now. The night deepens. The temple breathes around us. This is where the tale turns strange. The curse was designed with terrible precision. It would not kill the body. That would be too merciful. Instead, it would multiply thought itself. The victim would begin to think faster, louder, more completely. Every observation would branch into 1,000 observations. Every memory would split into countless variations. Every question would spawn infinite questions. The mind would accelerate and accelerate and accelerate until thought itself became unbearable, until silence became impossible, until sleep, blessed sleep, could never come again. Kentiamentio wrote it all down, the specific arrangement of divine names, the particular grammar of compulsion, the sequence of symbols that would, when read by human eyes, activate the curse within the reader's own consciousness. He tested it carefully, on animals first. A dog that had bitten a child in the temple courtyard was brought to him. He carved a simplified version of the curse onto a piece of pottery, placed it before the animal. Dogs cannot read, of course, but the symbols themselves carried power. The dog began to pace, back and forth, faster and faster. It would not eat. It would not sleep. Its eyes grew wild. After 3 days, it died. Heart exhausted. Mind burned away. Kentiamentio was satisfied. The principle worked. Now he would refine it for human consciousness. He carved the final version onto a stone tablet, black basalt, dense and enduring. The hieroglyphs were perfect, each symbol precisely spaced, each line flowing into the next. At the top, he wrote a seemingly innocent invitation. Speak these words and receive the blessing of Thoth. Thoth, God of wisdom, writing, and knowledge. Who would not wish his blessing? But the words that followed, the words that seemed to be a prayer, were actually the activation sequence for the curse. Anyone who read them aloud would be infected. The curse would enter through their voice, through their breath, through the vibration of those ancient syllables in their throat. And once inside, it would never leave. Kentiamentio sealed the tablet in linen, placed it in a wooden box, and gave it to Amenemhet. Place this in the tomb of the next royal burial, he said. Let it be sealed with the dead. Any thief who finds it will read it, and justice will be done. Amenemhet held the box. It felt heavier than it should. You are certain this is righteous work? He asked. Kentiamentio met his eyes. The dead deserve protection, he said. The living deserve consequences. And so it was done. Breathe with me now. Feel the cool stone floor beneath you. The temple is so quiet. Outside, the Nile whispers against the reeds. Inside, the oil lamps flicker. Shadows dance along the walls. We continue, gently, slowly. The tablet was placed in the tomb of Prince Kawab, son of Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid. Kawab's tomb was magnificent, filled with treasures, furniture carved from ebony, jewelry of gold and lapis lazuli, vessels of alabaster. And among these treasures, in a corner of the burial chamber, the wooden box containing Kentiamentio's tablet, innocent-looking, unadorned, waiting. The tomb was sealed. The priest performed the proper rituals. The mourners departed. The desert reclaimed the entrance. Sand drifted over stone. Years passed, decades, centuries. The old kingdom faded into the first intermediate period. Central authority collapsed. Tomb robbery became common, organized, almost professional. And one night, under a moon thin as a reed, a thief named Khaimwaset entered Prince Kawab's tomb. He was not alone. 3 others worked with him. They had spent weeks planning, digging a side entrance, avoiding the sealed doors, moving slowly, carefully through the darkness. They carried torches. The light jumped across golden surfaces, reflected in polished stone. Khaimwaset's heart raced. This was the greatest tomb he had ever entered. This would make him wealthy, set him free. The others began gathering objects, prying jewelry from statues, removing lids from canopic jars. Khaimwaset moved deeper into the chamber. In the corner, he found the box, simple wood, unremarkable, but it had been sealed with wax, official seals. That meant something valuable inside. He broke the seal, opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in linen, the basalt tablet. He unwrapped it carefully, held it close to his torch. The hieroglyphs were beautiful, precisely carved. He could read a little, enough to know this was something special. At the top, speak these words and receive the blessing of Thoth. Khaimwaset smiled. A blessing from the god of wisdom. He was not particularly religious. But why refuse a blessing, especially here in this sacred space surrounded by a dead? A blessing might protect him, might bring good fortune. He began to read aloud, slowly, carefully pronouncing each word. The curse entered him with the first syllable, but he felt nothing. Not at first. He finished reading, set the tablet down, looked around for other treasures. Outside the tomb, the night was vast, stars scattered across darkness. The desert breathed, the Nile flowed. Inside, Khaimwaset gathered objects, filled his bag, laughed with his companions. They left before dawn, covered the tracks, returned to the city of the living. And for 2 days, nothing happened. Khaimwaset felt fine, better than fine. He felt sharp, alert. He noticed details he had never noticed before. The pattern of sunlight on mud brick, the specific rhythm of a donkey's hooves, the exact number of palms visible from his window. He thought this was the blessing, enhanced perception, a gift from Thoth. On the 3rd day, the acceleration began. Pause here with me. Rest in the darkness of this temple. Feel how the air holds still, how the silence deepens. Outside, far away, a night bird calls. Once, then silence returns. We are halfway through the night. The tale continues, but we do not rush. We float upon these words like boats upon the Nile, drifting, patient, timeless. On the 3rd day, Khaimwaset woke before dawn, his mind already active, racing. He lay on his sleeping mat and thought about the tomb. Every detail crystalline in memory. The angle of the walls, the texture of the painted plaster, the weight of the golden objects. But then each memory began to branch. He remembered the wall and simultaneously remembered every symbol painted on the wall, and simultaneously remembered every brushstroke that formed each symbol, and simultaneously wondered who had painted it, when, with what pigments, what thoughts in the mind. The thoughts multiplied. Faster, faster. He sat up, trying to clear his mind. But clearing his mind required thinking about clearing his mind, which required thinking about the process of thought, which required analyzing that analysis. which required, by midday, he could not eat. Eating required too many decisions. Which bread, how much, what order to chew, how many times. Each decision spawned 1,000 considerations. By evening, he could not speak. Words arrived in his mouth already fragmented, each word carrying every possible meaning simultaneously, each sentence branching into infinite variations. Which was the right one? How could he choose? How could he know? His wife spoke to him. Kaima said, "What is wrong?" He heard her voice, and heard every possible inflection, and heard the concern and the fear and the confusion and the impatience and the love and the frustration all at once, and heard the sound of her breathing between words, and counted the breaths, and wondered if she was healthy, and remembered every time she had breathed differently, and wondered what that meant, and wondered why he was wondering, and wondered about wondering itself. He began to scream, not from pain, from overload, from the impossible acceleration of consciousness. His wife ran for help. The neighbors came. They held him down. He was strong, thrashing, eyes wild, not seeing them, seeing everything, every line in every face, every thread in every garment, every particle of dust in the air. They brought a physician. The physician examined him, found no fever, no wound, no poison in his stomach. "This is a sickness of the mind," the physician said quietly. But it was not sickness, it was curse. Kaim Waset did not sleep that night, or the next, or the next. His body exhausted itself, but his mind would not stop, could not stop. Every moment spawned infinite observations. Every observation spawned infinite questions. Every question spawned infinite answers and infinite further questions. On the 7th day, his heart gave out. The organs simply could not sustain the frenetic energy, the impossible demand. He died with his eyes open, staring, still thinking, still accelerating, even in death. For a few moments, the curse continued, until the brain itself ceased, until the neurons went dark, until silence, at last, returned. His companions from the tomb robbery heard about his death. They were troubled, but not overly concerned. Death was common. Life was fragile. One of them, a man named Ptahshepses, had taken objects from the same corner of the tomb, including another wooden box, sealed. He opened it 3 weeks later. Inside, a second tablet, identical to the first. Kentiamentiu had made copies. Insurance. Ptahshepses read the blessing, and the curse entered him. The pattern repeated. The acceleration, the fragmentation, the impossible multiplication of thought. Death in 7 days. Heart exhausted. Mind burned away. The third thief, Amenhotep, fled the city when he heard. He knew something was wrong, some curse from the tomb. He took his stolen treasures and ran south, to Elephantine, to the edge of the world. But in his bag, wrapped in linen, a small amulet he had taken from the tomb. Not valuable, just pretty. Carved stone, hieroglyphs on one side. One night, unable to sleep, he examined it by lamplight, tried to read the symbols, spoke them aloud. The curse was versatile. Kentiamentiu had carved it on multiple objects, large and small, obvious and hidden. Amenhotep lasted 6 days, in a strange city, alone, his mind devouring itself, faster, faster, until the end. Rest here, breathe the temple air, cool, still, sacred. The oil in the lamps burns low, the flames smaller now, shadows deeper. This is the rhythm of the tale. Advance, pause, breathe, continue, like the Nile itself, flowing, eternal, patient. News of the deaths reached Thebes. 3 men, all connected, all dying of the same strange madness. The priests began to investigate. They questioned families, examined the bodies, searched for common elements. It was Amenemhet who made the connection. The old high priest, the one who had sealed Khentiamentu's tablet in Prince Kawab's tomb. He realized the timing matched. The tomb had been robbed. The robbers had died. The curse had worked. He felt no joy, only cold certainty and growing dread. Because Khentiamentu had not stopped with one tablet. Amenemhet remembered now. The younger priest had worked for months after that first tablet, creating variations, improvements, different forms of the same essential curse. How many had he made? Where were they now? Amenemhet went to Khentiamentu's chambers. The priest had died 2 years earlier. Old age, natural death. His rooms had been sealed but not cleared. Inside, Amenemhet found a workshop of madness. Tablets, dozens of them, each one carved with curses, some designed to drive men mad through infinite thought, others through infinite memory, others through infinite doubt, others through infinite fear. And papyri, scrolls filled with variations, instructions for creating new curses, theories about the nature of consciousness and how to break it. Amenemhet stood in that room for a long time, the lamp in his hand trembling, his heart heavy. What could he do? Destroy the tablets? But they were already dispersed, sealed in tombs throughout the necropolis, waiting for thieves, waiting for the curious, waiting for anyone who would read them. He could warn people. But how? Announce that certain tablets contained curses that actually worked? That would only draw attention, create fascination. People would seek them out, test them, disbelieve until too late. He could do nothing, say nothing, let the curse fulfill its purpose, protect the tombs, punish the wicked. But were all who read tablets truly wicked? What of the curious scholar, the innocent scribe copying texts, the child learning to read? Amenemhet felt the weight of impossible responsibility. In the end, he did what he could. He gathered all the tablets and papyri from Khentiamentu's room, sealed them in a copper chest, and buried the chest deep in the desert, far from any tomb, far from any temple, far from any place humans frequented. He told no one where, not even the other priests. The secret would die with him. And it did. But the tablets already placed in tombs remained, waiting, patient as stone, eternal as curses. The night deepens around us. The temple holds its breath. Outside, the stars wheel slowly overhead. Inside, we sit in shadow and remembrance. Let me tell you about the second generation of victims. 70 years after Kaimwaset's death, in the time of the Middle Kingdom, a scribe named Nakht was commissioned to copy texts from an old tomb. Tomb robbery was still common, but now there were also official excavations, attempts to preserve knowledge, to copy the old wisdom before it was lost. Nakht was young, talented. He loved the ancient writings, the beauty of classical hieroglyphs, the wisdom of earlier ages. He was given access to a tomb in Saqqara, allowed to enter with papyrus and ink, to copy whatever he found. Among the texts, a tablet, black basalt, beautiful calligraphy. Speak these words and receive the blessing of Thoth. Nakht was delighted, a blessing prayer. This would be valuable, useful. He would copy it faithfully. But first, Why not speak it? Why not receive the blessing himself? He was about to spend weeks copying sacred texts. A blessing from Thoth could only help. He spoke the words carefully, clearly, with proper intonation, and the curse entered him. Nakt continued his work for 2 more days, copying texts, enjoying the quiet of the tomb, the cool stone, the sense of connection with the past. On the 3rd day, his handwriting began to deteriorate, not from lack of skill, but from overthinking. Each stroke of the brush required decisions: angle, pressure, speed, duration. He found himself analyzing each decision, which spawned further analysis, which spawned infinite regress. His hand froze, brush hovering over papyrus, unable to choose, unable to move, paralyzed by thought. The other scribes found him hours later, still frozen, eyes wide, mind racing, unable to speak, unable to explain. He died 4 days later. The supervising priest examined his copies, found them excellent, ordered them preserved, including the copy of the curse, which Nakt had completed before the symptoms began. The curse now existed in a new form, not carved in stone, but written on papyrus, easier to transport, easier to copy, easier to spread. Over the following centuries, that papyrus was copied 17 times, each copy as potent as the original, each one a vector for the curse. Some copies ended up in temple libraries, some in private collections, some in tombs, some lost, scattered, waiting in the sand. Breathe, rest. The night is kind. The temple is patient. We have time, all the time that ever was. Let me tell you about Meresank. She was a priestess in the temple of Hathor, in Dendera, in the time of the New Kingdom, when Egypt was at its height. Meresank was learned. She could read and write. She studied the old texts. She sought wisdom. One day, a trader came to the temple, offering papyri for sale, ancient documents, rescued from abandoned tombs. Among them, a copy of Nakt's copy, the Blessing of Thoth. Meresank purchased it with temple funds, brought it to the library, unrolled it carefully, read it silently first. The curse could be activated by silent reading or by speaking aloud. Either way, the symbols entered the mind, the pattern imprinted, the acceleration began. Meresank felt it immediately, a sharpening of thought, a quickening of perception. At first, it was wonderful, like awakening from a dream, like seeing clearly for the first time. She read other texts that day and understood them more deeply than ever before, made connections she had never made, saw patterns she had never seen. But by evening, the acceleration was too much. Every text she read spawned infinite interpretations. Every prayer led to infinite theological questions. Every ritual observation fractured into endless detail. She tried to meditate, to still her mind. But meditation required observing thought, which required thinking about thought, which required... She lasted longer than most, 11 days. Her training as a priestess gave her some resistance, some ability to observe without attachment, but the curse was stronger. On the 11th day, she walked into the Nile, not to wash, not to pray, to drown. She hoped death would bring silence, and perhaps it did. The other priestesses found the papyrus in her chamber, read the title, A Blessing of Thoth. They assumed it was one of her research texts, placed it back in the library, available, waiting. 3 more priestesses read it over the next decade. All 3 died. Finally, the high priestess recognized the pattern, removed the papyrus from the library, burned it. But the curse existed in other copies, other locations, other forms. The night grows deep, the deepest hours, when even the jackals are silent, when the desert holds its breath, when the boundary between life and death grows thin. We rest here, in the temple darkness, breathing together, slowly, softly. The curse continued through the ages, sometimes active, sometimes dormant, always patient. During the late period, when Egypt was ruled by foreigners, a Greek scholar named Ptolemaios came to Memphis. He wanted to study Egyptian wisdom, to learn the ancient language, to access the old knowledge. His Egyptian teacher gave him texts to practice reading, simple at first, then more complex, then a tablet rubbing. Someone had made an impression of Khentiamentu's original curse. The rubbing was on papyrus, portable, deceptive. Ptolemaios read it. His Egyptian was not perfect. He stumbled over some words, mispronounced others. But the curse was forgiving. It did not require perfect pronunciation, only genuine engagement with the symbols, only the mind opening to receive the pattern. Ptolemaios felt the familiar sharpening, the acceleration, the branching of thought. But he was Greek, trained in philosophy, skilled in logic. He tried to reason his way out, to analyze the phenomenon, to understand it and thereby master it. This made it worse. Every analysis spawned meta-analysis. Every logical step required examining the logic of logic itself. Every attempt at understanding fractured into infinite epistemological regress. He died in 3 days, faster than most. His philosophical training had made him more vulnerable, not less. His Greek colleagues were horrified. They blamed Egyptian magic, called it primitive, dangerous, warned others to avoid Egyptian texts. But some were curious. Some sought out the very texts they had been warned against, wanting to see for themselves, to test their own minds. The curse spread to Alexandria, to the great library, copied among thousands of other texts, catalogued, preserved, available. Scholars read it, philosophers examined it, students copied it. Some died, others went mad, a few survived, but changed, their minds damaged, their thoughts never quite coherent again. The head librarian finally recognized the danger, ordered all copies destroyed, physically removed them from the collection, burned them publicly. But the library contained hundreds of thousands of texts. Cataloging was incomplete. Some copies were misfiled. Some were in private collections. Some had already been borrowed and not returned. The curse persisted. Rest, breathe, feel the cool stone, the silence, the vast patience of the temple. We are in the deepest part of the night now, the darkest hours, the most sacred, when the boundaries dissolve, when time becomes fluid, when past and present breathe together. Let me tell you what happened when Rome conquered Egypt. Roman soldiers looted temples, carried away treasures, statues, jewelry, texts. Among the texts, inevitably, copies of the curse. Most Roman soldiers could not read hieroglyphs, so the texts were harmless to them. They sold them to collectors in Rome, to scholars, to the curious wealthy. A senator named Marcus Antonius purchased a collection of Egyptian papyri, hired a translator, a man who had lived in Alexandria, who knew hieroglyphs. The translator's name was lost to history, but his fate was not. He began translating the papyri for Marcus, working through them systematically. Most were mundane, letters, inventories, prayers. Then he reached the curse. He read it silently first, as was his practice, to understand before translating. The acceleration began immediately. He tried to continue working, but translation became impossible. Every word had infinite meanings, every symbol connected to infinite other symbols. The web of language became infinitely complex, paralyzing. Marcus found him 3 days later, collapsed over his work, dead, eyes open, ink spilled across the papyrus. Marcus was disturbed, but practical. He hired another translator. This one was more cautious. He examined the papyrus that killed his predecessor, decided it must have been poisoned. Ink mixed with something toxic. He would not touch it directly. But he looked at it, studied the symbols, tried to decipher them visually. And the curse entered through his eyes, through the act of reading, through the pattern imprinting on his consciousness. He died in 5 days. Marcus burned the entire collection, wanted nothing more to do with Egyptian magic. But other collections existed. Other soldiers had looted other temples. Other scholars had purchased other texts. The curse reached Pompeii, Athens, Constantinople. Wherever writing went, wherever the curious studied, wherever humans sought knowledge of Egypt, the pattern persisted, copied, translated, adapted. Some scholars began to recognize the danger. Warnings were written, lists compiled of forbidden texts. But forbidden knowledge has always attracted the bold, the arrogant, those who believe themselves immune. And so the deaths continued, scattered, occasional but persistent. Pause here, rest in the darkness. The temple breathes around us, stone and shadow, silence and time. Outside, the Nile flows, the stars turn, the desert remembers everything, forgets nothing. We continue gently, patient as sand, slow as centuries. In the time of the Byzantine Empire, a Christian monk named Pachomius studied Egyptian texts. He wanted to understand the old religion, to refute it effectively, to convert the remaining pagans. He obtained copies of various Egyptian religious texts, including, inevitably, the curse. But Pachomius had faith. He believed his God would protect him. He believed the old gods were demons, powerless against true faith. He read the curse as a prayer, confidently, aloud, in the chapel, before an icon of Christ. The curse cared nothing for his faith. It operated on consciousness itself, on the structure of thought, on the mechanics of mind. Faith could not protect against that. Pachomius felt the acceleration, tried to pray, but prayer became impossible. Every word of every prayer spawned infinite theological questions. Every petition fractured into infinite considerations. Is God listening? How does God listen? What is the nature of divine attention? How can the infinite attend to the finite? What does it mean to pray? What is the self that prays? What is... He lasted 7 days. His fellow monks prayed for him, tried exorcism, believed him possessed by demons. The exorcism made it worse. Every ritual word entered his fragmenting consciousness. Every prayer added to the infinite branching. He died during the 3rd exorcism, heart exhausted, mind gone. The monks burned his texts, called them cursed, warned others. But some of the texts survived, hidden, preserved by those who valued knowledge over safety. Through the medieval period, the curse hibernated. Most Europeans could not read hieroglyphs. The knowledge was lost, the symbols meaningless. But the texts remained in monastery libraries, in private collections, in forgotten corners, waiting, patient, breathe, rest. The night holds us gently. The temple is timeless. Here, centuries pass like heartbeats. Empires rise and fall like breathing. We approach the modern age. When Napoleon invaded Egypt, he brought scholars, scientists, artists, men who would study and document everything. Among them, linguists, men determined to decipher the ancient writing, to unlock Egyptian secrets. They copied texts from temples, from tombs, from monuments, and inevitably, they copied the curse.